Solving equations containing rational expressions. So to solve equations containing rational expressions, what you're going to do is you're going to clear the fractions by multiplying both sides of the equation by the least common denominator of all the fractions. We did this, we've done this earlier. When you want to clear fractions out of an equation, you just multiply through by the LCD. And so we're going to apply that here with these rational equations. And then we're going to solve the simplified equation as in previous sections. So here we have an equation. I know it's an equation because of an equal sign, and this equation has fractions in it. So we've learned earlier that anytime you have an equation that has fractions in it, the first thing you want to do is to get rid of those fractions. And the way you do that is you multiply every term by the least common denominator. Well, the least common denominator between 3x and 6 is 6x. The smallest number that will go into these two will go into is going to be 6. And then you have that x. So your least common denominator is going to be 6x. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all three of these terms by 6x. So I'm going to come over to the right and show you what I'm doing. I'm multiplying by 6x, and you know it's over 1 times 5 over 3x. This takes us back to the very first or second section that we talked about in multiplying monomials or multiplying rational expressions. So this is going to reduce. So you know that the 3 will cancel the 6 to 2. 3 will go into itself 1 time, 3 will go into 6 2 times, and then the x's cancel out. And you multiply the tops and the bottom. So you have 2 times 5, which is going to be 10 over 1, but we don't need that 10. And so this is what I'm doing. So the 3x will cancel the 6x and the 2, and 2 times 5 is going to be 10. Plus 6x times 1 is 6x equals, again, we'll go over to the right, 7 over 6 times 6x over 1. Well, the 6 will cancel the 6, leaving me with 7 times x, which is going to be 7x. So again, this is what I do. 6 will reduce with 6, and 7 times x is 7x. Now, I have a linear equation that you guys have solved so many of these, you should be old hands at this by now. So we'll minus 6x from both sides because those are our like terms. And so we have 10 is equal to 7x minus 6x is going to give you x. So x equals 10. Now what I need you to do is I need you to check. Remember, we can make these undefined. Whatever x is equal to cannot be making this go to 0. Okay, so 3 times 10 is 30. So we're good. Okay, so to solve an equation containing rational expressions, you're going to multiply both sides of the equation by the least common denominator of the rational expression in the equation. Then you're going to remove any grouping symbols and solve the resulting equation, and make sure you check the solution like we just did. Make sure that solution does not make any fraction go to. Alright, so here we have an equation, and this equation has fractions in it. So what we need to do is we need to multiply through by the least common denominator. So we have a common denominator, or we have a denominator of 2x, which is prime. We have a denominator of x plus 1, which is prime. And we have a denominator of 3x squared plus 3x, which is not prime, which means it will factor. So remember, to find the least common denominator, the first thing you're always going to do is try to factor if you can. So here, I know that there is a 3x in common. And so if I bring that out, I'm going to have x plus 1. Okay, so remember, to find your least common denominator, you're going to look at all of your factors. What are factors? Things that you multiply together. 2 is a factor, x is a factor, x plus 1, that group, is a factor. 3 is a factor, x is a factor, and again, x plus 1 is a group factor. So we're going to write down anything that's already in common. So x is in common. And keep in mind that this x is not this x, because this x belongs to a group. But we have an x plus 1 group that's in common. And then we have a 2. And we also have a 3. Okay, so write down anything that's already in common, and then write down anything that's not in common. So our least common denominator, let's multiply these monomials together. So x times 2 times 3 is going to be 6x. And then leave our groups alone. So So our common denominator is going to be 6x times x plus 1. Now, what I need to do is I need to multiply all three of these terms by this common denominator. So I'm going to multiply here by 6x times x plus 1. I'm going to multiply here by 6x times x plus 1. And I'm going to multiply here by 6x times x plus 1. So watch what happens. And remember, this denominator's gone now because it turned into this. So let's start and see what we can cancel out. I can cancel out these x's, and this 2 will go into this 6 3 times. And so now I have 3 times x plus 1 times 1. So let's multiply the monomials together first. 1 times 3 is 3, and then we can do the distributive property. And we'll need to do that so that we can combine like terms. So 3 times x is going to be 3x, and 3 times 1 is going to be 3. Alright, so we have a minus here, minus, and we're going to reduce where we can here, so the x plus 1 cancels the x plus 1, and I have 6x times 1, which is going to be 6x, equals, so what's going to cancel here? The x plus 1 cancels the x plus 1, the x cancels the x, and 3 will go into 6 2 times, so I'm left with just 2 times 1. And so all the fractions are gone. So now what I need to do is I need to combine like terms on the left hand side, because I have a 6x and a 3x that I can put together. So 3x minus 6x is negative 3x plus 3 is equal to 2. So now I need to find like terms. You have the 3 and the 2, they're on opposite sides. So we're going to minus 3 from both sides. So we have negative 3x is equal to negative 1. Divide both sides by negative 3. And so we have x is equal to 1/3. Now again, remember, we need to plug this 1/3 in here and make sure none of those go to 0. And I don't think they do, so we're good. Okay, so this is an equation, and it is an equation with fractions, and you can multiply through by the common denominator. But this equation is a special equation called a proportion. And to solve a proportion, it's really easy. It's what I like to call butterfly. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply this, and then you're going to multiply this, and then you're going to bring down your equal sign. And so you can see that it looks like a butterfly. So let's do that. So let's multiply this wing first. So you have 1 times x plus 1, which is going to be x plus 1. And then let's multiply this wing. So 2 times x minus 1 is going to be, and this is a distributive property, so 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times negative 1 is minus 2. And then you're going to bring down your equal sign. So you have this wing on one side of your equal sign, this wing on the other side of your equal sign, and then you bring your equal sign straight down. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to solve. Notice the fractions are gone, so that's good. So our like terms are on opposite sides, so I think I'm going to bring this x over here. And I'm going to have 1 is equal to x minus 2, add 2 to both sides, and I'm going to get x is equal to 3. And I can plug the 3 in here and here, and I won't get 0, so I'm good. Always check that, because if you come up with 0, there's no solution. Alright, let's try this one. I have an equation. It has fractions in it, so I need to find the least common denominator. This will factor. That's the difference of two squares. So I need to get it in its prime. So we're going to have 3 plus a times 3 minus a. Okay, so that one's gone. So now to find your common denominator, your least common denominator, write down any factor that you see that's in common. Well, I have a 3 plus a and a 3 plus a. That's already in common. I also have a 3 minus a and a 3 minus a. So that's going to be my common denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all three of these terms by that common denominator. So I'm going to multiply here by 3 plus a times 3 minus a. I'm going to multiply here by 3 plus a times 3 minus a. And I'm going to multiply here by 3 plus a times 3 minus a. Okay, So here, the 3 plus a, 3 minus a cancels out all of this. So there's nothing left to multiply. I just have 12. Plus, the 3 plus a cancel out the 3 plus a, and I have 3 times 3 minus a, if you could read that. And then equals, the 3 minus a cancels out the 3 minus a, and I have 2 times 3 plus a left. Now, if you want to go ahead and distribute here, you can. I just wrote down so it'd be easier for you to see. So we have 12 plus 9 minus 3a, and I have 6 plus 2a. On the left-hand side, I can combine like terms, so I have 21 minus 3a is equal to 6 plus 2a. Now my like terms are all on the same, are all on different sides, so I'm going to try to move those by doing the opposite. So I have 21 is equal to 6 plus 5a. And then if I minus 6 from both sides, I'm going to have what, 15 is equal to 5a. Divide both sides by 5, and we're going to get a is equal to 3. Now, look at this. A is equal to 3. We did all that work and we came up with a is equal to 3. Watch this. If I plug 3 in right here, 3 minus 3 gives you 0. So that means that this whole entire problem has no solution. No solution. Alright, let's try this one. See what happens. So again, I have an equation that has fractions in it. So I need to get rid of those fractions by multiplying 3 by the least common denominator. To find the least common denominator, I need to factor anything that will factor, which is going to be this trinomial. So I'm going to have x plus, and I think it's 5 and 2. Alright, so my least common denominator is going to be anything that's already in common, which is going to be the x plus 5. And then anything that's not in common, actually this 3x plus 6 will cancel, or will factor. I can bring a 3 and get 3 out and get an x plus 2. So there's also an x plus 2 in common. And then, so let's see, there's an x plus 5 in common, that's done. There's x plus 2, and then there's another 3. So that's going to be your common denominator. Okay. So we're going to multiply all 3 of these by the least common denominator of 3 times x plus 5 times x plus 2. And let's see what cancels out. So for the first one, the x plus 5 cancels out, the x plus 2 cancels out, and I'm left with 3 times x plus 2 equals, the 3 will cancel out and the x plus 2's will cancel out, and I'm left with 1 times x plus 5, which of course is x plus 5, minus the x plus 5's will cancel out, and so I'm left with 1 times 3, which is 3 times x plus 2. Alright, so let's clean this up. Let's do the distributive property. We're going to have 3x plus 6, and we're going to have x plus 5. And this is a minus 3, or negative 3 going through, so we have negative 3x minus 6. Let's combine like terms. So we have 3x plus 6 is equal to x minus 3x is going to be negative 2x, and then 5 minus 6 is going to be negative 1. Now our like terms are on opposite sides, so let's go plus 2x and plus 2x. So the 5x is going to go over here, not where I tried to put it. And then let's minus 6, and so we'll have 5x is equal to negative 7. Divide both sides by 5, and we get x is equal to negative 7/5. Okay, so we have x is equal to negative 7/5. If I plug negative 7/5 in for these, that's not going to go to 0, that's not going to go to 0, and that's not going to go to 0. So that is going to be my answer.